this will be a theme in, what we talk about a lot, not just today, but perhaps the next few days. You just used the line when talking about the Sacramento Kings and the Jordy Fernandez thing about emulating the Denver Nuggets. There might not be a better team for the Sacramento Kings to model themselves after than the Denver Nuggets. And you realize that Calvin Booth saw he had a duo here in Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray, and he worked really hard to get the right pieces around them. He went and made the deal for Aaron Gordon, which it was like, all right, that's interesting. I like Aaron Gordon is a little bit all over the place, but it turns out he fits perfectly with this team. You went and landed Contavious Caldwell Pope. The Los Angeles Lakers needed to get off that salary. You were able to go get Contavious Caldwell Pope. He's fit in really nicely with what Denver has done as well. And you look, and I think Mike went with 7 guys last night. Michael went with 7 guys last night.
Total.
And they all produced. They all produced for him. And I think that Calvin Booth has done a great job of building out this roster. And to echo what you said a minute ago, emulating the Denver Nuggets is not a bad strategy for Sacramento.
I totally agree. And if you even look at the season, they went out and they traded Bones Highland, which I think a lot of people thought really highly of. Either you're in or you're not when it comes to Michael Malone. Either you're part of the solution or you're part of the problem. And they built a team that really is in his image. Like, there's a lot of guys on this roster that are gritty. The Bruce Browns, the Kentavious Caldwell Popes, like these guys, even Christian Braun or Brown, like these guys, they fit who he is. They're guys that are going to run through a brick wall for you. And smart basketball players, physical basketball players. I just think that they really did do a good job of creating something that, that works, around a superstar. You don't have 2 superstars there. You have 1 superstar and 1 really good player. And here they are in the NBA finals. They're sort of bucking the system, the NBA system that's like run amok over the last decade and a half of building these super teams. I love it.
Yeah, I'm with you. You were listening to D-Lo and KC with ESPN 1320 Kings insider James Ham sitting in for Kenny Caraway here on KIFM. West Sacramento 98.5 FM, KRXQ HD2 Sacramento, ESPN 1320. Always live on the free Odyssey app. You can watch the show on twitch.tv/ESPN1320 and youtube.com/ESPN1320. We welcome all of those that are watching. We hope you hit the thumbs up, follow buttons, subscribe buttons, depending on the platform that you're on. If you're scrolling through Twitter, you see us on the timeline. Appreciate you. Facebook as well. Hit the thumbs up, hit the like buttons, do all of that good stuff. Trista Crick at the top of the 2 o'clock hour. Jason Jones of The Athletic in the final hour of the show. Talk about building around Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray. That's the task that Monty McNair has in building around Domantas Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox. And we already saw some of that executed over the course of the last season or so with the acquisitions of Kevin Huerter and Malik Monk. And we know how valuable both of them have been in the last season. And then the drafting of Keegan Murray. I don't know. And this is where, your Denver, your Calvin Booth, your Michael Malone, you're trusting, your Michael Malone trusting Calvin Booth to work together with the coaching staff, find guys that work for this team. That's the task faced with Monty McNair now and Mike Brown. Find that Aaron Gordon type, find that Christian Brown type, that Bruce Brown type, find that extra piece. Bruce Brown's a really good defender. I look at him like, man, he's just a rare combination of a role player who's a good defender but can still shoot. He can still score. And I mean, he's not going to you don't want him trying to shoot the lights out for you, but he's a capable scorer in his role. And that seems to be, we talked about Jared Vanderbilt, and Kenny was adamant when it came to adding Jared Vanderbilt to Sacramento. It's like, well, wait a minute, if he can't score, then what do you do? Because he showed in this series, he struggles to score. And we all know the kind of hangups with Davion Mitchell a little bit this year. You can't have them both on the floor at the same time. So it just shows what like kind of a rare combination that some of those guys on Denver are, and how one, difficult they are to find. Two, when you find them, what it can look like.
Yeah, I mean, the mission has to be to find two-way players. To
It's
find
just so difficult, though.
Yeah, but you've gotta do it. You've gotta go out there and find physical, like, two-way players that fit your system. You know the players, what fits. You can see it. You can see that, you need the three-point shooting. You have to find as many, not Bruce Brown, Bruce Bowens.
Mm,
That's what you need. You need, like, as many of those guys as you possibly can find, and different heights of those guys. If you can get a 6'5", a 6'7", and a 6'9" version, all of those things, like, that's great. That's what you need. You have to be able to go out and find those guys. And again, they're available out there. You can find them, but they've got to be like what you talked about. Like, what's the difference between, like, Bruce Brown is a very good defender.
hmm
Matisse Thybulle is considered an excellent defender, but you lose so much on the offensive end that's not going to work. And you've just got to figure out a way to go out there, and they're hiding. You got to find them, though. And there's other pieces to the puzzle that you need too. That's why I point to a guy like Josh Hart, which is like the fact that he does everything that Bruce Brown does, but he also averages like 7 rebounds a game from a guard position or a small forward position. That would make a lot of sense. There's a lot of guys, even like we talked about the OG Anunoby thing. I will keep coming back to him because he's just the much better version of Bruce Brown. And like, how do you find these guys? Or how do you acquire them? And you can't just go out there and look for offensive players and high basketball IQ offensive players that can shoot the three. You got to find these two-way guys that are physical and, set the standard. Like, for me, Bruce Brown reminds me a lot of Tony Allen. Like, he's maybe not as crazy as Tony Allen, maybe not quite as good defensively,
hmm
but he's right there. And like a good ball player, you got to find these guys.
Yeah, it's a difficult task. If with the Sacramento Kings, finding those guys, when you evaluate what you need, does everything center on Domas, or does everything center on Domas and De'Aaron, and you find the needs from there, the shortcomings from there? Does everything start with them as the center of how you build this roster?
Yeah, and like, to give Monty a little bit of a break, I mean, he just got these guys together. They only played together like 10 games at the end of last
hmm
season before this season started. He really didn't know everything and how it would all fit together until you put some pieces and kind of figured it out this season.
Well, I think headed into last season, and speak from our conversations, both off this show and on this show, everyone knew, well, they need shooting.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
that much was clear, even though it was only 10 games. And that's where Monty deserves a ton of credit. Obviously, Monty knew what we all knew, and he went and got it. That was, I mean, not to minimize what Monty did at all. That was obvious. Like, we all knew that. Every Kings fan knew that.
Mhm.
You knew it. Everyone who watched the team knew it. Now it feels like the process is a little bit more intricate. We could talk about 3-and-D guys. We could talk
Yes.
about, tough guys who could defend. We could talk about all this different. That's a lot harder to find than a quote shooter.
Yeah, so this is like, my degree's in history, right? So what I love about history is that you can look at like a major event, right? And then you can basically, in history, you can scroll in and start looking at a major event, but like individual pieces of a major event. And you can just keep using basically the little Google scroll bar until you get all the way into, like, again, reading individual biographies about a specific, you know, war general that did a specific battle. Like, you can get into the nitty gritty, but then you can zoom back out and look at it as like a major event again. And so you can zoom in and zoom out. And that's, I think, what the Kings have to do at this point. They've got to a point where, from the really wide angle, you can see that this is a good team. But when you start to zoom in and get closer and closer, you start seeing where the holes are that you really have to fill. You have to find a way to, again, find the shooter, but find the shooter that can play defense. It can't just be finding a shooter. You've got to find a 6'11" guy who can, run around and defend, but he also has to be able to block shots. Like, there's a way to fine tune what you've got right now and just continuously make it better. And that's why, again, the Kings are in the first year of this. And that's what's encouraging is how good they were in the first year. Like 48 wins is a huge monumental achievement. Now, how do you get to the next level? It's a little bit of growing together. You can get better by growing together for sure, by keeping the same basic people in place for a couple of years. But even in coming into this offseason, we knew that when they traded Halliburton, they didn't have enough playmaking. So they went out and got a guy like Malik Monk,
Mm-hmm.
and even a subtle guy like Kevin Herter, who averages a lot more than, he's around like 3.5 assists a game. Those are things that you kind of miss. Like, I think that they did a really good job of filling up some of these pieces, but that's why you also, as a general manager, your job is hard, because you can go out and make a move one year that looks brilliant, and then the next year it could not work, or the next year you could see that that player, while you like him a lot and he does what you wanted him to do and he doesn't do anything wrong, there are things that he doesn't have in his arsenal that you need to go get. And so that player could have to be replaced, or that player's like spot in the rotation could get diminished. So you're always having to basically reassess and rebuild who you are and what your team is at all times.